Ministry of Al-Kharj Major General Turki Al-Malki, a spokesperson for the ministry, has confirmed the operation via a statement on social media platform X. The drones were intercepted as they approached the city, securing Saudi Arabia's airspace. This comes as the kingdom remains on alert amid increased regional tensions. More details will follow as the situation develops. Now we have another breaking news. President Donald Trump has suggested that the United States will retaliate soon after its embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, was struck by 2 suspected Iranian drones. In an interview, Trump has said the American public would find out soon how the U.S. plans to respond, but did not provide any further details. The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh has confirmed the attack, which caused a limited fire and minor material damage. Following the strike, the embassy issued a shelter-in-place alert for U.S. citizens in Riyadh, Jeddah, and Tehran. Now we welcome back Mr. Adrian Calamel. He's joining us live as a terror scholar from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Calamel, for staying with us. Now, how do you analyze this escalating situation in the Middle East? Do you think they are going to, all of these countries in the Middle East will be dragged into this conflict now?
I don't know if they're going to be dragged into it. I don't know if they're going to take action. What I will say is that I do believe a lot of them are going to allow us to start using their bases, which was before this conflict. They were saying, no, we will not allow you to use our bases. You can't even transit through our airspace. That's all going to change, and that gives us more freedom of action in the battle space. Yeah, this the targeting of Riyadh, and then also, yeah, the United States coming out and saying, Trump saying that there's going to be a response to the death of the 6 service members. There's one area that's of interest to me that really kind of wasn't targeted much during the 2 years of the conflict in Gaza, even though the proxies did act up there, and there's been real concern inside the Green Zone, and that's in Iraq. I wonder if, as far as regional spillover, I don't think it's going to be regional spillover. I think the regime and the proxies that are associated with it are going to be more and more isolated, and you're going to see the countries that, like the GCC countries, Jordan, you name it, start to come around to the side of the United States.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calamel, for sharing that insight with us. Please do stay with us. We have another breaking news coming in from Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated on American TV news that the United States and Israeli military campaign against Iran would not drag on forever, but it is intended to be a short, decisive push. Netanyahu has called the conflict not an endless war, but rather a gateway to peace, and said he believes there is a lasting path to peace in the Middle East if the campaign achieves its objectives. His comments come amid continuing strikes and retaliatory attacks across the region in the widening war with Iran, with both sides exchanging military actions in multiple countries. Now we welcome back Mr. Adrian Calamel. Thank you very much, Mr. Calamel, for staying with us. Now looking at this, in the beginning they said this Operation Epic Fury is for 4 days, and now they're saying it might become longer. Trump has said it might become like a month, and now Netanyahu is saying this. What's your take on, this?
The physics was known for quite.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching The Wall Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the headlines of this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump has stated that the U.S. attack on Iran is advancing ahead of schedule, but warned that the conflict could last longer than the initial estimate of about a month. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that military action against Iran could continue for some time. but it won't last years. He also suggested that this campaign could pave the way for peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The Israeli military has reported that it shot down 2 unmanned drones that crossed into Israeli territory from Lebanon, part of rising cross-border tensions tied to the border Middle East conflict. US President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to criticize former Presidents Obama and Biden's nuclear deal with Iran, claiming it would have led to a nuclear weapon 3 years ago. This comes amid escalating Middle East tensions. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney arrives in Australia to strengthen relations between the two nations as global tensions rise, focusing on defense, trade, and critical minerals. Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa held a telephone conversation with Prime Minister of Pakistan Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif on the latest developments in the region, amid the recent escalation as the two sides jointly affirmed their commitment to develop Syrian-Pakistani relations amid heightened tensions in the region. Zimbabwe on Monday began releasing nearly 4,000 inmates who were granted presidential amnesty in the bid to ease overcrowding in prisons. The cabinet announced the amnesty in February on the same day to approve sweeping changes to the constitution as a plan to extend 83-year-old President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term till 2030. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, confirmed that the company is collaborating with the U.S. Department of Defense to update their agreement, ensuring OpenAI services won't be used by intelligence agencies like the NSA. Now we start this hour with U.S. The U.S. Embassy in Iraq has ordered non-emergency government employees to leave the country due to escalating security risks. Now, taking breaking news from Iraq, the embassy has also issued a travel advisory urging staff to avoid using Baghdad's international airport because of safety concerns. In a related development, Mora Namdar, a State Department official, has warned U.S. citizens to depart now from over a dozen countries, citing serious safety risks. The advisory covers Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and other countries in the region, urging citizens to leave using commercial flights as soon as possible. Now we move on to U.S. The U.S. military has launched a series of attacks on Iranian military sites in response to escalating tensions in the Middle East. U.S. Central Command confirmed that U.S. forces destroyed several key facilities, including Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps command posts, Iranian air defense systems, and missile launch sites. The sustained operations also targeted military airfields and drone launch sites. These strikes come after the outbreak of war over the weekend, as the U.S. intensifies its military actions against Iran's strategic infrastructure. The full extent of the damage is still unfolding. Now we welcome Mr. Keith Vaz. He's a former British minister, joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for joining us. I hope you're staying safe there. How's the situation like in Dubai? What are you seeing and what are you hearing?
Well, at the moment, it's very calm. People are going about their business. They're going to work. They are going to the shopping malls. And last night, they were going out. It's business as usual from that point of view. For the tourists and the visitors, like people like myself and others, obviously it is a worrying time because it's not a time that we're used to in places like the UK and in Europe. We were told originally that flights had resumed, flights had left Abu Dhabi and Dubai airport. Now, we're not sure whether that is happening, but we were told certainly that they were ready, and I can hear at least one plane go over as we speak. Let's hope it's a commercial aircraft and not anything else. So we are following advice, which is that these are serious times to be careful and be cautious. But this is a financial capital. Dubai is, one of the world's financial hubs. So you can't actually stop operating in a place like Dubai. And certainly the UAE government wants to show a period of normality. The ruler was out in the Dubai shopping mall yesterday with his family to show that it was business as usual, because clearly they cannot afford, no country can afford to be seen to be a pariah, unable to welcome people, because that's the Dubai economy. The Dubai economy is built on tourism.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Vaz. I'd like to also welcome Ms. Daniela Bloom. She's an author and political commentator, joins us live from San Francisco. Thank you very much, Ms. Bloom, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you analyze it that the situation is escalating, of course, in the Middle East, and do you think that this can go on for, like, you know, the longer than the initial predictions or the plans by U.S. government, which was 3 to 4 weeks? How do you analyze this current spread or the situation?
Well, obviously everything is still moving just as we speak. I see that the IDF is striking Tehran and Beirut. I don't think Trump likes to be in war. I think he is strategic and likes to win. This might not be as quick as the 12 days we had in June, but I do believe that they are going in with some sort of strategy, and they want to be successful, and there will be some growing pains. Unfortunately, there will be casualties, but I think that they will be as limited as possible, and I'm very encouraged by the unity in the Middle East. Former countries that would have a lot of conflict coming together, united against this regime, and I'm very hopeful for the outcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bloom and Mr. Vaz, for joining us and sharing that insight. Please do stay with us as we come back to you. Now, moving on to Taiwan. Taiwan has expressed its support for the international community's efforts to help the Iranian people pursue freedom and democracy. Taiwan's foreign ministry has voiced hope that Iran's citizens will soon enjoy these rights, backing the U.S. and Israel in their efforts. Taiwan has also condemned Iran's recent missile and drone attacks in Qatar and the UAE and other Gulf nations. Let's listen in.
台湾作为国际民主社会的一员，我们支持国际社会协助伊朗人民追求自由民主的努力，希望伊朗人民也能早日享有自由、民主与人权。外交部并谴责伊朗在近期所采取的无差别军事攻击。目前中东地区如阿拉伯联合大公国以及卡达等多国的领空关闭，所以滞留在当地的国人务必要提高警觉，并且耐心等候空域重启，同时也要遵守当地政府的安全指引。
Now we welcome back Ms. Daniela Bloom. She's an author and political commentator. Thank you very much, Ms. Bloom, for staying with us. Now, you know, we've seen Taiwan's leader comment and show support for the Iranian people and the Israel and US's efforts to change the regime. How do you think that, you know, also yesterday we saw Ukrainian President Zelensky cite something similar? Or do you think that President Zelensky and Taiwan sees some similarity in or their own reflection in Iran?
There will be a redistribution of power. It is not a coincidence that Venezuela's Maduro was targeted and taken out. Venezuela has been a source of oil for Iran. When you weaken Russia and China's abilities to get oil, that will impact other countries like Ukraine, like Taiwan. It is all interconnected. So a redistribution of power is very, very important.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Ms. Bloom. Mr. Vaz, thank you for joining us again. What's your take on this? Do you think that, you know, Ukrainian president, yesterday we saw his statements coming, now we're seeing Taiwan's leaders say this. Do you think they see their reflection on this, on the situation in Iran?
Well, I think every country is going to think very carefully about what is happening this is obviously a breach of international law when two countries, Israel and the United States, attack a third country, Iran. I think everyone accepts that, even the President of the United States accepts that he did not go to the Security Council and get a resolution in support of this action. So we are now in uncharted territories where countries that are very big can in effect do what they want to other countries. And that's the problem about a lawless world. Who do you then go to when there is a crisis involving different forces? So it's a worry. I hope very much that this intervention will not last long. It's not clear why the talks with Iran broke down. Iran has been a problem for years and years and years, and it's been a threat to other countries in the Middle East. So the question is, why now? Why is this happening now when it didn't happen, say, a month ago, when we know exactly what Iran possesses and what it has? So these are questions that only the president can answer, and indeed Congress, who don't seem to have been consulted in any meaningful way. If there's going to be a declaration of war under the Constitution of the United States, Congress has to have a debate and has to support it. And the Republican Party has control of both houses. So the issue is, why was Congress not consulted? They were told, the Gang of Eight, the leadership of Congress was told, but why were they not consulted? So it's illegal. It's an illegal war that is unconstitutional. What flows from that is what happens after that occurs. Somebody needs to bring everyone to the table. Is it the UN? Is it someone else? Someone needs to act as the honest broker in these circumstances to let both sides pause and then decide what they need to do.
Thank you
This
very
is the
much.
problem we face.
Yes. Mr. Vaz, thank you for sharing that. Building on that, I would like to welcome back Mr. Bloom. Ms. Bloom, what's your take? Do you think that UN is capable right now of realistically bringing these two back to the table? To me, it seems like Iran, it would be very, very difficult or challenging to get Iran's trust back to come into negotiation table, regardless of who is mediating.
And I think the U.S. does not trust the UN. I don't think they are the ones for the job. We talk about international law being broken time and time again. That's exactly what the regime of Iran has done. They signed a treaty saying that they would not have any nuclear weapons, and yet evidence, Steve Woodcock just came out and said there was tons and tons of verified evidence of nuclear weapons, even though they signed that they wouldn't. So I feel like you cannot, in the Middle East, work on diplomacy. Most of the peace deals that have happened in the Middle East have been done through strength, through deterrence. And Trump did the best he could with communicating to Congress his intentions. He did the best he could communicating with Iran. He gave them 60 days. And they were calling his bluff, and he was not bluffing. And sometimes you have to do the hard thing. But I look at Saudi Arabia uniting with Emirates, uniting with Qatar. Jordan just jumped in on this letter. I think we have a real shot at a united effort to destabilize this terrible, tyrannical regime in Iran. And I am hopeful for the future. We can speculate on so many different things, but we won't really know until things settle, and I am hopeful.
Thank you very much for sharing that powerful message with us. Now we move on to our next news. The U.S. Embassy in Kuwait has closed indefinitely following retaliatory missile and drone attacks. Now we are taking breaking news coming in from Kuwait. The embassy's compound in the Bayan district was targeted early Monday amid growing regional tensions. The U.S. State Department has issued an urgent shelter-in-place order for all American citizens and personnel, citing the ongoing threat of missile and UAV strikes. The closure follows the death of Iran's supreme leader and escalating retaliatory strikes by Iran and its regional allies. U.S. embassies in Saudi Arabia and other locations have also been targeted. Now we move on to US and China. US and Chinese trade negotiators are set to meet in mid-March ahead of highly anticipated summit between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The meeting, which will take place in Paris, will focus on potential business deals, including Chinese commitments to purchase Boeing aircraft and US soybeans. Talks are also expected to touch on the future of Trump's tariffs on fentanyl, Taiwan's situation, and the broader economic relationship between the two powers. Despite rising tensions in the Middle East, including the US military operation in Iran, plans for the leaders' meeting remain on track. US and Chinese trade negotiators are set to meet in mid-March ahead of a highly anticipated summit between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The meeting, which will take place in Paris, will focus on potential business deals, including Chinese commitments to purchase Boeing aircraft and US soybeans. Talks are also expected to touch on the future of Trump's tariffs on fentanyl, Taiwan's situation, and the broader economic relationship between the two powers. Despite rising tensions in the Middle East, including the US military operation in Iran, plans for the leaders' meeting remain on track. US and Chinese trade negotiators are set to meet in mid-March ahead of a highly anticipated summit between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The meeting, which will take place in Paris, will focus on potential business deals, including Chinese commitments to purchase Boeing aircraft and US soybeans. Talks are also expected to touch on the future of Trump's tariffs on fentanyl, Taiwan's situation, and the broader economic relationship between the two powers. Despite rising tensions in the Middle East, including the US military operation in Iran, plans for the leaders' meeting remain on track. US and Chinese trade negotiators are set to meet in mid-March ahead of a highly anticipated summit between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The meeting, which will take place in Paris, will focus on potential business deals. Now we welcome back Mr. Keith Vaz. He's a former British minister, joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for joining us again. Now, looking at US and China, how do you analyze, their relationship right now? Do you think that China is, they are going to also discuss what's going on in the Middle East?
I think the relationship is pretty bad at the moment, and anything that can bring these two sides together is very good. One of the things that one should notice about Donald Trump is that he admires strong men, not necessarily strong leaders, but strong men. And President Xi Jinping is regarded as a strong man. Obviously, you have to be if you're the president of China. And therefore, a meeting between the two of them, I think, will be important. It is highly anticipated, and it will allow these two men to look into each other's eyes and work out exactly what they intend to do. The Chinese have issued a statement today, I understand, condemning what is happening in Iran. Iran provides 10% of all their oil, and therefore it is important for them that that supply is maintained. So there are implications everywhere. That's why it's called the Middle East, because the slightest issue here reverberates around the world. It affects the cost of your petrol when you go to the petrol station in New Delhi and try to fill up. That will go up. The cost of living will go up. The loss to airlines is around about £65 million a day. All this stuff matters economically, and the Chinese, if anything, rather like the Americans, are interested in commerce, and they are interested in ensuring that the economy works. So it is good that they're going to meet. It's important that they re-establish relations, and I hope that that's going to be done as quickly as possible.
Yes. And how do you think that US sees China as an ally of Iran?
Well, anyone who isn't an ally of the United States is automatically branded an ally of Iran. If you were getting 10% of your oil from one particular country, and that country's oil supply is being attacked, then obviously you have to protect your sources of oil. Where are we going to buy our oil from in the future? That's the issue. And I don't think that they're natural allies, if you like, because Iran is an Islamic state. China is not an Islamic state. And therefore, I don't think it has very much in common on those grounds. What it has in common is economic interests. So if your life supply is being cut off, you have to deal with the country that you are dealing with. That is why it's exceptionally important to get these things done.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr.
I am
Baz.
very fearful
Yes.
of the situation. We're sitting here in this hotel in Dubai. We've just heard a whole lot of planes go over. There are complaints that the Americans are abandoning their base here. I think probably because they've been told to go. What attracts Iran to a country like the UAE is the fact that they've got American bases. There's no bad blood, particularly, between Qatar and the Gulf states and Iran. They've learned to live with each other. They have to. They look across the Hormuz Strait and they see the other country. You have to live with your neighbor. What's exciting the Iranians is the fact that the American bases are here. And I think that once they are evacuated, the situation here will improve greatly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baz, for highlighting that. Thank you. Now we move on to U.S. Protests have erupted across multiple U.S. cities denouncing the U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran. Hundreds have rallied outside the Georgia state capitol in Atlanta, demanding an immediate end to the war. Protesters criticized the U.S. for its involvement, with some calling for a redirection of military funds to public services. In San Francisco, demonstrators condemned the escalating conflict, with one protester calling the invasion brutal and unlawful. Meanwhile, protests also took place near the U.S. Embassy in Manila, in Philippines, where an American flag was burned in opposition to the U.S.-Israeli strikes. The Philippine president has confirmed the death of a Filipino worker in Israel and urged citizens in conflict zones to seek shelter. Let's listen in.
The United States doesn't have the moral authority to determine, the democracy of any country. And actually, when we want to, talk about the U.S. role in Middle East, it's not to bring democracy or peace or freedom, but it's to exploit the people, exploit the land, and exploit the resources. So we oppose war with Iran, and we, want to, stand in solidarity with the majority of Americans who, of course, oppose this war.
Ever since I was a kid, the U.S. has been at war for whatever reason, and they always give us these excuses that we later find out are just completely made up. And this is clearly just the same playbook of weapons of mass destruction from the other wars in the Middle East. And it's the same kind of thing, and it's not for us, it's not for the Iranians, it's for Israel, and it's for the billionaires that profit off of this whole situation. So.
Now we welcome back Mr. Keith Baz. He's joining us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Mr. Baz, for joining us again. What do you think about the opposition that's a voice also, of course, not just growing, but affecting, or we are seeing the surge around the world of that? And what do you think President Trump will have to say to justify his actions?
Well, the American people voted for Donald Trump. He is the elected leader, and therefore, when he takes action because he has a mandate. We have to be different from those countries that don't elect our leaders. We may not agree with them, and I think those people who've just spoken do not agree with Donald Trump. But the fact is, he's the elected leader of the United States. What matters in the United States is the issue of how do you keep your leaders in check, and that is through Congress. But Congress has not made a particular noise about this at this minute, and neither have any other elected officials, though the governors of individual states have. It's very partisan over there. Anything Donald Trump does, the Democrats disagree with. Anything Joe Biden did, the Republicans disagree with. So this will go on forever. That's the nature of democracy. The issue for the American people is they elected a president who was going to put America first. And therefore, I think that by nature, I agree with Daniela Brum when she spoke. I don't think that Donald Trump wants war However, the effect of it is that that's exactly what has happened. They are, I'm afraid, perpetrating this war, and there will be lives lost, Iranian lives and American lives and lives of people who live in the Gulf states. Nobody wants this war, really, honestly, except two countries. Well, one country in particular, Israel, because Israel fears for its security. So what we need to be doing is to reassure Israel that she is safe. And the best country that can do that, of course, is America. But what we also need to do is to keep the Gulf countries, the Gulf states, safe and make sure that they don't suffer as a result of what's going on. The final thing is, as far as Iran is concerned, they have the government that their people want, in exactly the same way as Saudi Arabia. They have their own leaders, and they have to deal with their leaders. There is no world power that determines these matters. It can only be determined by the people of Iran. They must decide whether they're fed up with the current regime or they want it to carry on. But whatever happens, I think there has to be respect for sovereignty. And the other issue is, I think the people here where I am at the moment in the UAE are worried. They're going about their business, but the number of cars on the streets in Dubai, anyone who's been to Dubai will know traffic is a big problem. It's quite easy to get around because people are staying at home. People are worried. And therefore, it's important that this is brought to a conclusion swiftly. The question is, who is the honest broker in all this? Who is going to bring the sides together? And I think Saudi Arabia has a big, big role to play in this, because although the American bases have been attacked, the Saudi Arabian people have not been attacked. What's happened in Dubai is, as the drones go over towards the American airbase, the UAE authorities launch attacks on the missiles themselves. And when they come down, they fall on places like the Palm, the Fairmont Hotel, and other places of that kind. So this is a moving story. It is literally breaking news because it changes every minute. For example, we were told this morning that we could board a flight tomorrow. We're now being told that flights are being cancelled. Nobody knows what's going on. So it is essential that there should be some kind of closure on this. And that best happens when people stop bombing other people and countries are left to determine their own futures.
Thank you very much for sharing that deep insight with us and staying with us throughout, Mr. Raz. Thank you. Now we have a breaking news coming in from Lebanon. Lebanese Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for targeting 3 Israeli military bases in retaliation for Israeli airstrikes on its strongholds in Lebanon, including the southern Beirut suburbs. In a series of statements, the Iran-backed group has said it used drones to strike the Ramat David and Meron bases in northern Israel. Hezbollah also targeted a base in the occupied Golan Heights with a rocket barrage. This marks a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict between the two sides. Now we move on. President Donald Trump took to social media today to claim that the United States has virtually unlimited munitions stockpiles at medium and upper medium grades, and that these supplies are superior to other countries' arms. Trump has argued that the U.S. can successfully fight wars using these resources thanks to his military rebuilding efforts during his first term. He has also criticized U.S. President Joe Biden for sending hundreds of billions of dollars worth of high-end weapons to Ukraine without replacing them. Trump has promised that under his leadership, the U.S. is ready to win big in any future conflict. Now we move on. U.S. Federal Communications Commission Chair Brendan Carr has signaled that the FCC will not block Paramount's $110 billion deal to acquire Warner Brothers, downplaying competition concerns over a potential merger between CBS and CNN. Carl has explained that concerns about market power previously raised over Warner Brothers' deal with Netflix were not applicable here. The deal will be funded through a mix of equity and debt, with $47 billion coming in from the Ellison family and Redbird Capital Partners. While lawmakers worry the merger could reduce consumer choices, Carr believes the industry competition remains strong and is considering regulatory changes to encourage investment in growth in broadcasting. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has stated that the US attack on Iran is advancing ahead of schedule, but warned that the conflict could last longer than the initial estimate of about a month. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that military action against Iran could continue for some time, but it won't last years. He also suggested that this campaign could pave the way for peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The Israeli military has reported that it shot down 2 unmanned drones that crossed into Israeli territory from Lebanon, part of rising cross-border tensions tied to the broader Middle East conflict. US President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to criticize former Presidents Obama and Biden's nuclear deal with Iran, claiming it would have led to a nuclear weapon 3 years ago. This comes amid escalating Middle East tensions. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney arrives in Australia to strengthen relations between the two nations as global tensions rise, focusing on defense, trade, and critical minerals. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara held a phone conversation with Prime Minister of Pakistan Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif on the latest developments in the region amid the recent escalation, as the two sides jointly affirmed their commitment to develop Syrian-Pakistani relations amid heightened tensions in the region. Zimbabwe on Monday began releasing nearly 4,000 inmates who were granted presidential amnesty in a bid to ease overcrowding prisons. The cabinet announced the amnesty in February. On the same date, approved sweeping changes to the constitution as a plan to extend 83-year-old President Emerson Mnangagwa's term till 2030. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, has confirmed that the company is collaborating with the US Department of Defense to update their agreement, ensuring OpenAI services won't be used by intelligence agencies like the NSA. Now we start this hour with US President Donald Trump has sharply criticized former Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden's nuclear deal with Iran. President Trump has claimed that if he hadn't terminated the deal, Iran would have developed a nuclear weapon years ago. President Trump's remarks came as tensions in the Middle East escalated. The US and Israel's airstrike campaign against Iran has intensified, with Israel targeting Lebanon in retaliation for Hezbollah strikes. Meanwhile, Tehran continues missile and drone attacks in the Gulf states, hosting US military bases. Trump has also warned that the military operation could drag on for weeks and the leadership vacuum in Iran following the death of Supreme Leader Khamenei remains uncertain. Now we welcome Mr. Adrian Calamel. He's a terror scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Calamel, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, you know what?
Good to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Calamel. Now, you know, as we see Trump emphasize that Iran was so close to nuclear deal or making a nuclear bomb, yet he earlier, last year, said that the Midnight Hammer, Operation Midnight Hammer, obliterated that facilities or developments. Do you think there is a change in his stance of where Iranian nuclear capabilities lie now versus last year after Midnight Operation Hammer? What's your take?
That is a good question. I think he he came out immediately after when there really was not much of a battle damage assessment and kind of declared victory, saying we obliterated it. When he said it at the time, I thought it was a little premature, and it turned out it was, because there were a couple of sites, Isfahan, Parchin, and especially the one site, Pickaxe Mountain at Natanz, that were always going to be a concern. And sure enough, those are the sites that they need to go back and hit again. Pickaxe Mountain, to my knowledge, as of now, has not been targeted as of yet with the regime, but that I think the objectives were much more different with this campaign.
Right. And do you think, why is he criticizing? Well, it's not new for him to criticize or trade blame towards past presidents. What do you think about his criticism for the past president's nuclear deal with Iran?
Well, I think it is absolutely fair to criticize the nuclear deal that Obama sold to us. He pushed it through an executive order. It was not pushed through Congress because it would not pass through Congress. And it was written by Ben Rhodes, who his major in college, even though he crafted this deal, his major, he was a creative writing major. And the option that was sold to the United States was either you vote for yes for this, or pressure your congressional members that yes or to this, or if you say no, you're going to have a nuclear weapon. When in fact what happened was it really just kicked the can down the road, gave the regime a bunch of money, and that was the state of the nuclear deal. It was bad all the way around. Now, as far as Trump saying, he could have prevented this years ago. I think he, during the 2 years of his, the last 2 years of his first term, he definitely did put the regime in a difficult spot with their nuclear program. But they were able to get back to kind of where they wanted to be just through the Biden administration's refusal to enforce sanctions on the regime.
And how do you analyze the difference between Midnight Hammer versus the Operation Epic Fury? Because to me, the target even seems different, because in Midnight Hammer, they only targeted, like you mentioned, Isfahan and a few other cities that are supposed to have these nuclear facilities. But this time it has Tehran, it has many other cities. What's this difference?
Yeah, it's the target package, what they're going after. It was very limited before to the nuclear sites at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. This initial strike was to blind the regime, to confuse, and also to take away the retaliatory capabilities. So they hit IRGC bases, IRGC Control and Command, the Aerospace Division, which is involved with the communications for ballistic missiles and things of that nature. They took out naval sites. So it's really about degrading the regime's ability to the best of their ability to unleash havoc, diminish their ability to unleash havoc on the region. We're seeing the ballistic missiles flying to the UAE, to Bahrain, to Riyadh. We're seeing the drones. The initial phase was to reduce that. Now, what we have after a little over 2 days is that we have air dominance. We control the skies. So that's going to be, now we're going to start to see, I would imagine, more Natanz, Pickaxe Mountain, those sites being targeted, those nuclear sites in particular being targeted. But now, the initial phase was to, wipe out the command structure, so it caused confusion as far as response goes, who's in control, and then also to, gain air dominance so that they can go run through their target package as the Air Force and Navy and the CENTCOM goes through it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kalmev, for sharing that deep insight with us. Please do stay with us as we'll come back to you. Now, looking at Iran, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has called on regional countries to pressure the U.S. over its strikes on Iran. Araghchi has emphasized that Tehran is not at war with regional nations, but warned that U.S. military bases across the Middle East are legitimate targets. Meanwhile, Israeli forces successfully intercepted Iranian missile barrages early today, marking the fourth day of the ongoing U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran. Joint operations launched over the weekend have expanded with no end in sight as Israel retaliates against Hezbollah and Tehran continues missile and drone attacks. In a separate incident, objects fell from the sky in Qatar following missile interceptions. The Pentagon has released new footage showing U.S. aircraft operations, including B-1 bombers, striking deep inside Iran. The conflict shows no signs of de-escalating, with 6 U.S. service members reported killed. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio has warned Iran that it will face the hardest hit. He has also added that regime change is not the U.S.'s agenda, destroying ballistic missile capabilities is. Now let's hear what Marco Rubio has shared.
اینکه ما بخوایم جنگ رو منطقه‌ای بکنیم، اصلا جنگ منطقه‌ای خواهد شد. به این علت ساده که پایگاه‌های آمریکا و تأسیسات آمریکا در کل منطقه ما پراکنده هست. خب وقتی آمریکا به ما حمله میکنه توسط جنگنده‌هاش، توسط ناوهایی که میفرسته، اونها خب به خاک ما دسترسی دارن، توسط انواع و اقسام موشک‌ها و جنگنده‌ها اینها حمله میکنن. ما به خاک اونها دسترسی نداریم، ولی به پایگاه‌های اونها در منطقه دسترسی داریم و از نظر ما پایگاه‌های اونها یک هدف مشروع به حساب میاد. اما الان وضعیت فرق میکنه. ما با کشورهای همسایه‌مون طرف نیستیم، با نیروهای آمریکایی موجود در پایگاه‌های مستقر در خاک این کشورها طرف هستیم و با آمریکایی‌هایی که به هر شکلی دارن به ما هر روز و شب حمله میکنن و اسرائیلی‌ها البته. و اینکه پایگاه‌های آمریکا در منطقه بخوان سربازان تخلیه بشن، برن مثلا تو هتل‌ها مستقر بشن، خب طبیعی هستش که این خودش یک موضوعیت پیدا میکنه. ما به هر شکل و هر شیوه از خودمون دفاع میکنیم، از مردم.
Now we welcome back Mr. Adrian Calmel. He's joining us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Calmel, for staying with us. Now, we're hearing, foreign ministers say that all the countries in the region are legitimate targets, but they're not in war with them. What are we supposed to make of this situation? It seems to me like what he's saying and what the Iranian forces are doing or attacking is there's a difference.
Yeah, it's rather rich that he's saying that. He's saying he's just targeting U.S. bases, but he's hitting high rises in Bahrain. He's hitting that the Gulf states have united against this regime. They know that, the UAE, the amount of interceptions that they've done as far as drones and ballistic missiles go, I think it's getting close to 1,000. So, this is part of what we're not seeing. There's a lot of coverage about the launches at Israel, but the whole idea of, we're not targeting you, we're just targeting our U.S. bases. Well, either that means you're lying, number one. Number two, your ballistic missiles are horrible because they're just not hitting the intended targets. Or, we're doing it, we're pressuring you, and we want you to pressure the United States. And that's not happening. What it's doing, it's pulling them all together. And there's talk about them taking kinetic action against the regime in response now. Again, another miscalculation by the regime.
Do you think that there's also a misjudgment or misalignment within Iran between the IRGC forces and a foreign minister?
I think that may be true with some aspects, but this was the plan that was laid out. If you looked at their social media, what they said, what their top propagandists were saying, the message was loud and clear. If the United States attacks us and you have a base in that country, we are going to attack you. We are going to turn the region into fire. We're going to rain fire down on everybody. And they're holding true to that promise. So, secretly behind closed doors, and I think now a little more overtly, the Gulf or the GCC countries, they're coming together and they're aligning. And even Qatar, which shares in a gas field and derives the majority of their wealth from with the Islamic Republic, is strongly condemning them and realizing that they're not our ally right now at this point.
Thank you very much for highlighting that, and please do stay with us as we have more breaking news coming in. Now, Saudi Arabia's defense ministry has announced that its air defense systems successfully intercepted and destroyed 8 drones near the capital, Riyadh, and the city of Al-Kharj. Major General Turki Al-Malki, a spokesperson for the ministry, has confirmed the operation via a statement on social media platform X. The drones were intercepted as they approached the city, securing Saudi Arabia's airspace. This comes as the kingdom remains on alert amid increased regional tensions. More details will follow as the situation develops. Now we have another breaking news. President Donald Trump has suggested that the United States will retaliate soon after its embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, was struck by 2 suspected Iranian drones. In an interview, Trump has said the American public would find out soon how the U.S. plans to respond, but did not provide any further details. The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh has confirmed the attack, which caused a limited fire and minor material damage. Following the strike, the embassy issued a shelter-in-place alert for U.S. citizens in Riyadh, Jeddah, and Tehran. Now we welcome back Mr. Adrian Calamel. He's joining us live as a terror scholar from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Calamel, for staying with us. Now, how do you analyze this escalating situation in the Middle East? Do you think they are going to, all of these countries in the Middle East will be dragged into this conflict now?
I don't know if they're going to be dragged into it. I don't know if they're going to take action. What I will say is that I do believe a lot of them are going to allow us to start using their bases, which was before this conflict. They were saying, no, we will not allow you to use our bases. You can't even transit through our airspace. That's all going to change, and that gives us more freedom of action in the battle space. The targeting of Riyadh, and then also the United States coming out and Trump saying that there's going to be a response to the death of the 6 service members. There's one area that's of interest to me that really kind of wasn't targeted much during the 2 years of the conflict in Gaza, even though the proxies did act up there, and there's been real concern inside the green zone, and that's in Iraq. I wonder if, as far as regional spillover, I don't think it's going to be regional spillover. I think the regime and the proxies that are associated with it are going to be more and more isolated, and you're going to see the countries that, like the GCC countries, Jordan, you name it, start to come around to the side of the United States.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kalmer, for sharing that insight with us. Please do stay with us. We have another breaking news coming in from Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated on American TV news that the United States and Israeli military campaign against Iran would not drag on forever, but it is intended to be a short, decisive push. Netanyahu has called the conflict not an endless war, but rather a gateway to peace, and said he believes there is a lasting path to peace in the Middle East if the campaign achieves its objectives. His comments come amid continuing strikes and retaliatory attacks across the region in the widening war with Iran, with both sides exchanging military actions in multiple countries. Now we welcome back Mr. Adrian Calmel. Thank you very much, Mr. Calmel, for staying with us. Now looking at this, in the beginning they said this Operation Epic Fury is for 4 days, and now they're saying it might become longer. Trump has said it might become like a month, and now Netanyahu is saying this. What's your take on, this? How long can this conflict last? And also, do you think there's a difference of, once again, analysis of this situation between Trump and Netanyahu?
Yeah, I think if you look at what they were able to accomplish within 48 hours or so, I would expect that the time frame would probably be about 4 to 6 weeks. I think they are achieving their objectives, and now that they have air supremacy, the other objectives, such as reducing the IRGC, eliminating besiege bases, eliminating the MOIS, taking care of the rest of their Navy, encouraging defections while this is taking place. My hope, we can't see this, but on the ground, there's probably people working with groups, I wouldn't say dissident groups because they're inside the country, but groups that have been targeted by this regime that are part of this opposition, the people in the streets. It could be a bunch of students that are being coordinated with. So, it's very early days in this operation. I hate to say and put a timeline, and when people say, I saw they tried to pin Trump, Rubio, Hegseth, and the general on a timeline, and you don't put timelines into a battle plan. But in realistic speaking, I would say this is a 4 to 6 week campaign battle. If you put in a artificial or arbitrary withdraw date or drawdown date, that just tells the enemy exactly when you are going to pull yourself off the battlefield.
Thank you very much for sharing that and staying with us throughout our news, Mr. Calmel. Thank you. Now we have another breaking news coming in. The U.S. Embassy in Islamabad has announced the cancellation of all visa appointments due to the current security situation in Pakistan. The cancellations will affect the embassy in Islamabad as well as the consulates in Karachi and Lahore, with the order remaining in effect until March 6th. This decision follows a deadly outbreak of violence in Karachi, where at least 10 people were killed when security forces opened fire on demonstrators storming the U.S. consulate. The protests were sparked by reports of the killing of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in a joint US-Israel airstrike. Tensions are mounting in the region, and authorities are closely monitoring the unfolding crisis. The US Embassy has not yet clarified if further measures will be taken based on security conditions. Now we move on to a world report. Bill Clinton has testified before the House Oversight Committee, denying any wrongdoing during his interactions with Jeffrey Epstein. The former president has stated that he never witnessed any criminal activities linked to Epstein. Clinton has also exonerated his wife, Hillary Clinton, saying she had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. This testimony marked the first time a former president was compelled to testify before Congress. Meanwhile, the committee's Republican chairman, James Comer, has rejected calls to subpoena Donald Trump despite pressure from Democrats. However, Clinton's closed-door deposition follows growing scrutiny over Epstein's connections. Let's listen into what the former U.S. President Bill Clinton has shared.
Democracy requires every person to play their part, and I hope that by being here today, we can bring ourselves a little further away from the brink and back to being a country where we can disagree civilly and search for the truth and justice, and that outweighs the partisan urge for spectacle and point scoring. I will do my part, and I hope you'll do yours. The second reason I'm here is that the girls and women whose lives Jeffrey Epstein destroyed deserve not just justice, but healing. They've been waiting too long for both. Through my brief acquaintance with Jeffrey Epstein, though it ended years before his crimes came to light, and though I never witnessed during our limited interactions any indication of what was going on, I'm here to offer what little I know so I can do my part to prevent something like this from happening again. I have to just say one personal thing. Since Hillary came in yesterday, she had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein.
Now we welcome Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. Now looking at this, how significant is this development that Bill Clinton has testified, and also what do you think when he said, in US, he wants US, a country, to become once again a place where the disagreements between far right and far left can occur in a civil manner, now that we are seeing the rise in extreme right and extreme left?
In this case, what President Clinton said was just denying his involvement of the Epstein crime. And this is expected, and so that's why there is nothing new. But view from the picture, view from the video, it is true that President Clinton was a customer of the Epstein, because the victims just side of him in the bus. And so that's why it looks like he is the main customer of him. So that's why it relies on the investigation, not this testimony. So, but this is under investigation, and information published is not enough to prove he was involved.
The physics was known for quite a while, and so I think.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines coming in this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war with Iran will not last for years as Israel strikes Hezbollah targets in Lebanon and Iran hits Gulf states hosting US bases. US President Trump earlier projected a 4 to 5 week conflict, but now signals a broader open-ended campaign as the fighting expands. Hezbollah says it targets 3 Israeli military bases with drones and rockets, including Ramat David, Meron, and a site in the Golan Heights, in response to Israeli strikes on its strongholds in Lebanon. The Iran-backed group says the attacks follow Israeli airstrikes on dozens of Lebanese cities, including southern suburbs of Beirut. The United States confirms its embassy in Riyadh is hit by drones overnight, closes the facility, and urges Americans to shelter in place. Saudi officials say 2 drones cause a small fire and minor damage, as witnesses report smoke and explosions in the diplomatic quarter. China denies reports it is providing military support to Iran and says its backing is political and moral, not weapons supplies. Beijing, which relies heavily on oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, condemns US and Israeli actions and calls for a ceasefire and return to nuclear talks. US officials say American forces destroy Iran's Revolutionary Guard's command posts, air defense systems, and missile and drone launch sites in weekend strikes. US Central Command says the sustained operations also target military airfields as the Middle East conflict escalates. In other news, at least 42 civilians are killed and 104 wounded in clashes between Afghan and Pakistani forces between February the 26th and March the 2nd. The figures come from the UN mission in Afghanistan as cross-border fighting escalates between the two neighbors. In the US, former President Bill Clinton tells lawmakers that Donald Trump once said he had some great times with Jeffrey Epstein before their relationship soured. In a video deposition to a House committee, Clinton says Trump raised Epstein at a golf event in the early 2000s, years before his presidency. President Trump says the United States is not where we want to be on its highest-end weapons stockpiles as forces deploy munitions against Iran. He says supplies of medium and upper medium-grade arms are sufficient, adding wars can be fought successfully using those infantries. Amidst turmoil in the Middle East, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has issued several statements on the ongoing Iran conflict. It emphasized that the Iranian nuclear issue should eventually be resolved through political and diplomatic means, and reiterated China's respect for Iran's right to peaceful nuclear energy use. China also expressed deep sadness over the mass civilian casualties and urged all parties involved to cease military operations. Furthermore, the ministry highlighted concerns about the potential spillover of war into neighboring countries. We have further news coming out of the conflict and more reactions. The United Nations spokesman Stefan Dujarric reiterated UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' concerns over the rising tensions and military activity in Iran and the broader Middle East. Dujarric called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and a return to dialogue and diplomacy in line with the UN Charter. Dujarric also expressed concern over the growing chain of events, especially regarding France's readiness to assist Gulf nations targeted by Iranian retaliatory strikes. He stressed the need for de-escalation and emphasized that diplomacy must resume to avoid further conflict. Let's take a listen into the statements.
Over the past 48 hours or so, the Secretary General has been in touch with a number of regional leaders. Just a few minutes ago, he spoke by phone with His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of the State of Qatar. The Secretary General reiterated his condemnation of the recent attacks against Qatar, which is in violation of the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He also reaffirmed Qatar's role as a strong and valued partner of the United Nations. The Secretary General and the Emir discussed the situation in the region and the urgent need to end the current military escalation and a return to dialogue in the interest of regionals.
Joining us in this discussion is Professor Veselin Popovsky, a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joining us live from the Indian capital. As well, we have Rabinder Sachdev, an international affairs expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Also, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this situation is developing extremely rapidly, so I ask to keep your answers brief. Professor Popovsky, first of all, starting with you, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said, despite reports, it is not supporting the Iranian military in its campaign against Israel and the United States, its response, I should reiterate. Where do you think China stands and will continue to stand as this war continues to expand across the region?
That's a very good question. In fact, we can speculate whether this is true or not. We don't know, that's the answer, because Chinese may supply, as they did for Russia, and that's my reaction will be to compare with Russia. Officially, they never said they support Russia with any military support, with any weapons and equipment, but there are a lot of technologies that could be supplied and that could be used for military purposes. The same with Iran. They may say we support Iran with military means, with military support, but we know that China is very interested in a relationship with Iran, not least because it buys a lot of oil, it exports a lot of goods. China and Iran have good relationship as not those to be affected, and that's why China tried to say we support morally the Iranian regime, but not with military means. But nobody can be sure that behind that statement there are now some secret supplies by China to Iran. We will know that one day in the future. That's my opinion.
Rabinder Sachdev, coming to you next. Beijing and Tehran do have a strategic but not mutual alliance, of course. As this war continues disruption, both in the region and economically after the Strait of Hormuz, where do you see Beijing standing as this conflict goes forward?
I think Beijing will continue to stand the way it is right now, adopting a posture, a position which is very diplomatically nuanced, not giving away anything, generic kind of a statement. But yes, it would say that which it is right now, that what America is doing is against the rule of law or international norms, which it is definitely so. But, the US says we are not bound by it. We are creating a new set of rules for the world. That's what the US says. US agrees that it's not going according to what the world norms have been, and the US says, guys, this is the real world. Take it or leave it. This is my world now. So China is calling that out. China would, as our colleague Popovsky professor was talking about, would continue behind the screen, maybe assisting some, and maybe, yes, some components, some electronic components, which could go into some of the, the drones or the missiles program, etc., as China has been doing with Russia also. And even with Russia, it doesn't seem that China has given, military grade munitions, final products. But it does seem that they've been supplying several components which could have gone into the war machine manufacturing, the military industrial complex of Russia. Similarly with Iran, they might start doing some of that at a little accelerated pace, but not too much and not overt, I would say. China would prefer to focus on its own situation, on its own growth, as well as its own global positioning, and let the Americans and West Asia fight it out amongst themselves. Their military stocks going down. By stocks, I mean, the stock levels going down, hurting each other, economic loss, military loss. China is happy for that, to let that go on happen without interfering itself in this.
And Professor Popovsky, just your brief comment. We've, of course, seen the United Nations Secretary General condemning the actions of both the United States, Israel, and, of course, Iran as well. As the potential for this war seems to be getting bigger and bigger by the day. Is this once again highlighting that the United Nations as a body really is showing it's in need of reform?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right here, Thomas, that United Nations only make those declarations but nothing else. And that's why we have, for example, the Donald Trump and other players, the Board of Peace, and all other initiatives comes because of that lack of unity in the Security Council in the United Nations. We have the declarations, which are a good thing. Obviously, what the Secretary General and his representative, Juraric, is saying is correct. These are violations of the Charter. They should be condemned. Everybody should do that. But we want to have a better United Nations. And for that matter, again, we need to have a different Security Council without the veto of great powers that constantly block and paralyze action, collective actions, to address exactly those types of situations. Imagine that there was no veto in the Security Council. In that scenario, Russia would have been condemned and there will be globally imposed sanctions on Russia. And in the same way here, on Israel, there could have been globally mandated sanctions where everybody in the world cannot buy a single barrel of oil from Russia or anything from Israel. If this is the United Nations we need. Without the veto, the global sanctions on those regimes would have existed like they did exist against Saddam Hussein when Iraq invaded Kuwait. We want the similar situation.
Okay, gentlemen, do stay with us. We have further updates coming out of the conflict, where Iran's ambassador to the UN, Amir Sehed Iravani, has accused the United States and Israel of deliberately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure in Iran. Iravani condemned the recent strikes, describing them as blatant violations of international law. He further argued that the attacks are part of a broader pattern of aggression aimed at destabilizing the country. Iran is calling for international accountability, urging the UN Security Council to take immediate action against these actions, which Iravani labeled as war crimes. Let's take a listen into the statements.
The United States and the Israeli regime are deliberately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure. The schools, hospitals, Red Crescent facilities, and residential buildings were attacked. On the first day of the aggression, the girls' school in Minab, a small town in Hormuzgan province in southern Iran, was deliberately destroyed. As a result, 165 innocent schools girls were martyred. As I mentioned, we are not attacking the interests of our neighboring countries. We are defending ourselves. We are targeting the facilities and the bases and the assets of the United States in this country, in those countries which is out of the... As long as aggression continues, Iran will defend itself decisively and without...
Meanwhile, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, has declared that Israel will do whatever necessary to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Danon emphasized that Israel is conducting military strikes decisively, surgically, without apology. He outlined Israel's objectives, which include halting Iran's nuclear ambitions, dismantling ballistic missile capabilities, destroying Iran's navy, and crushing its proxy networks. Let's take a listen in to the Israeli ambassador.
Our objectives are clear. No nuclear weapon, no ballistic missile threat, destroy their navy, and crush the regime's proxy network. We are hitting decisively, surgically, without apology. So I said it very clearly that one of the goals of this joint operation is to make sure that they don't have nuclear capabilities to threaten the entire world. And we all know that those sites, unfortunately, after the summer, they continue to develop them and to rebuild them. So we will do whatever is necessary to make sure that...
Rupinder Sachdev, I want to come to you on this. We, of course, there have had two conflicting statements from both the Iranian and the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, both of which are putting this defensive stance forward to the UN. What did you make of both the statements there from both Dani and Larijani at the UN there?
Sure, I'll come to that, but two quick points and then an answer will emerge automatically. You know, it is said that America is attacking Iran also because the Iranians say death to America and death to Israel, right? If you see the reasons why Trump says that, you know, Iran is our enemy, because they say death to America. Has anyone ever bothered to think, or has Trump